It's very nice to be here. And the greatest part of this experience has been to see you and to see this place. This is a very special place. I had the benefit of talking with faculty, your administration last night, and I knew a lot about Middlebury before I got here because when people found out I was going to be speaking, I got emails literally from all across the country. So I'm very honored to be here, and particularly for you all, who I believe care about right and wrong. And everything that I've sensed today is that this place is built on values and making a difference. So I feel very much at home here. And I'm very glad that I created some words for you in light of what my experience has been. And I'm very aware that the sooner I'm done, the sooner you can get your diploma and get out of here. So I won't have you suffer through a long commencement speech. Having suffered through a lot of them on my own, I realized that if we were going to get to the promised land on the basis of long commencement speeches, we would have arrived some time ago. So I just took a couple of pictures out of my life and just talked about those a little bit. So I'll share those with you. And in that context, I am really honored to be here as your commencement speaker for Middlebury. The fact that I was selected as commencement speaker, given my background and life circumstances, is in itself a beacon of hope. Once upon a time, I was, in fact, an inner-city public school kid, failing academically and totally adrift, and was lucky enough to meet an art teacher named Frank Ross, who was an accomplished potter. I saw him passing by the art room door one day, make a ceramic vessel, and it turned out to be a defining and magical moment that altered my life permanently. At the end of that year, Mr. Ross took a job at a local university and declared that he was not going to leave me behind to die on the streets like a lot of my friends. He drove me out to the University of Pittsburgh, insisted I fill out a college application, and I was admitted as a probationary student because I failed the scholastic aptitude test because in our school no one had ever shown us the test. Well, I'm very pleased to tell you that not only did I graduate from the University of Pittsburgh with honors, I am now a trustee of the University of Pittsburgh and was the commencement speaker and I was the commencement speaker in front of 13,000 people and got up and said, "Don't give up on the poor kids. They might end up being the commencement speaker one day." And it is that story that underscores a number of deep concerns and beliefs that I have about the current state of public education in our country, and that includes every state in the Union and my home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 15 years ago, when I began to look more critically at the educational system beyond Pittsburgh and the state of Pennsylvania, at that point, the public school system across this country was at the point of virtual collapse. I still believe that this is the case, and if it is possible to imagine such a condition, the problem has gotten worse. Dropout rates in most urban centers were averaging 30% for minorities and closing in on 20% for non-minorities. Today, the dropout rate is 50% for Black and Hispanic kids across this country. Literacy levels and computational skills have regressed, and child rearing centers are appearing in schools while art programs are being closed or defunded. Metal detectors are now standard operating practice in most urban schools. In my own city, metal detectors are permanent fixtures. They are the first thing that greets kids in the morning, along with cameras and steel gray doors. In two instances, two of those high schools once led the nation in national merit scholars, with many students scoring perfectly on the SAT. What now exists are guards, metal detectors, and fear as the basis for the provision of education. In a recent incident at one of those schools, children were at the point of a full-scale riot. Tragically, in most urban schools, this has become the norm and not the exception. In other words, unlike Middlebury, schools resemble places of incarceration rather than places of hope. One would think that I am describing a place from hell itself, but in fact, I am describing one school district in only one city. And fortunately, a school district that now has capable executive leadership and a superintendent determined to make a positive difference. We experience similar numbers in public education, and no one seems to mind. There are no emergency bulletins on the television news and no march on the Board of Education with these dropout rates. Everyone sleeps soundly as if everything is okay. I would suggest to you that things are not okay, and I would predict that the net result of the collective neglect of our schools and its children will have significant and possibly catastrophic implications on our lives if something is not done to arrest this problem. Communities that have dysfunctional schools are themselves ultimately dysfunctional. Companies become reluctant to move to communities whose schools are not up to par. Property values tend to stay below market rate because the investment climate is compromised. The psychological process of a negative self-image creates an environment that becomes a cancer out of control. The good news, however, is that the conditions and circumstances that I have been describing are capable of remediation. Communities can have schools that work, that are cost-effective, that operate in an environment of promise and hope. The reason I know this is true is because I run a school that is successful at educating students from poverty circumstances, and a school that is creating a climate of hope and safety rather than one of failure. When I arrived at the Bidwell Training Center some 40 years ago, it was a dysfunctional vocational school with poor management, low morale, a non-existent board, and students unable to compete. Prior to assuming the Bidwell role, I had founded Manchester Craftsmen's Guild as an inner-city program modeled after my own life with Mr. Ross. Manchester took clay and photography and used them as tools to rebuild the lives of these kids. To this day, my work with the arts and those children continues with extraordinary success. When I took over Bidwell, on the other hand, the place had holes in the floor and holes in the roof, and the front door was hanging on one hinge. And the guys were on their knees gambling at the front door, and I didn't recognize the game they were playing. I asked the secretary, I said, "Oh, Miss Jones, when I came here today at Bidwell, the kids were on their knees gambling at the front door. I didn't recognize the game they were playing." She said, "Oh, they were taking bets on how long you'd last in the job." So that was Bidwell, man. My official act is I bought the beer and I bought the paint. Now, so anybody doesn't show up and paint this building is fired. And remarkably, I had 100% participation in painting the building. I am pleased to tell you that since that time, we have decided to become the future and not the past. I went out to employers and asked them what they needed in an employee before we started teaching the courses. A common sense solution, but one that is rarely adopted by most educational institutions. In the case, for example, of the Bidwell Corporation, a world leader in chemical analysis and manufacturing, we have, for a 10-year period, taken inner-city, out-of-work kids and adults and made them fully functioning and certified chemical lab technicians in 10 months flat. When one visits our school, you will see poor working-class mothers doing analytical chemistry and using logarithmic calculators within 1 year of enrollment in our school. We presently have 40 research technicians working for Bayer at its Pittsburgh facilities, And once having demonstrated to Bear that we could exceed its expectations, we are now training people world class for companies like PPG, Calgon Carbon, BASF, Aristech, Nova Chemical, and Alcoa. These technicians are finding opportunities with medical systems, including the University of Pittsburgh Medical System and the West Bend Allegheny Health System. We made a fascinating discovery, which you can quote me on. The only thing wrong with poor people, from what we can determine, is they don't have any money, which happens to be a curable condition. It's all in the way that you think about people that drives behavior. Once an environment of performance is established and a culture based on achievement and value, education is embraced. Our school and its faculty have become accustomed to high-powered, market-oriented strategies that are literally changing lives. It is my belief that a substantial majority of our children would perform at a much higher level of interest and sophistication if schools adopted a career focus in addition to basic academic education. I do not believe that there is any value added to having a young person enroll in college because they can't do anything else in life. I believe there is dignity in vocation. The other half of my life, finally, involves the use of the arts as a strategy for educating inner-city kids. The program entitled Manchester operates on the belief that every child has the potential for achievement. The program is located with Bidwell Training Center and world-class facilities that offer state-of-the-art equipment and material. Last year, 90% of those kids graduated from high school, and 90% of those kids went on to college. And we have exacted significant outcomes over the last 3 years. These kids were designated as potential failures, unable to learn. People respond to their environment. In other words, if you build a school with metal bars and metal detectors and cameras and steel doors, people act like prisoners. If you build schools that stress learning and excellence and look that way, you will achieve results very similar to what we have experienced in Pittsburgh. There is no advanced degree required for achieving the impact on children I have just described, but it does require passion, a zeal, and insistence on doing things the right way as opposed to doing them the wrong way. We created a music program in jazz, and one guy who was a very famous trumpet player showed up. His name was Dizzy Gillespie. And I asked Mr. Gillespie, why would you come to a black school in the middle of the inner city that doesn't have even a reputation in music? He said, Billy Taylor told me a black guy built it, and I didn't believe it, wanted to see for myself. And you're too young to appreciate what you built here, man, but I'm not. And you ought to build one of these centers in every city in America, and I'm going to help you do it. Dizzy replied, thank you. He then said, I am so taken with what you have accomplished here that I want to leave a gift for you. The gift is my permission to record this concert, and I will give you the rights to the music as my contribution. Someday the music may have some value, and I wanted it to be known for all time that I was here. We recorded Dizzy, and he died several years later, but not before Joe Williams, Monty Alexander, Stanley Turrentine, Tito Puente, Carmen McRae, Betty Carter, Shirley Horn, and Pat Metheny knew about our work, just to name a few. In the vast majority of the cases, we not only recorded the artists, we recorded them in sold-out venues in the middle of the inner city. These artists came to love the mission of the school as I suspected that they would. In a very special instance, our center was able to convert the music of Count Basie to a jazz CD that won something called a Grammy Award. In fact, we've won 6 Grammy Awards, and our center has the highest win rate of any record company in the world for Grammy nominations versus wins. The outcome of all this is that our organization created its own label, just as Dizzy had hoped. And finally, today it is my hope to build centers like this across our country and eventually the world. And this is why I came to Middlebury. given what I have come to know about you all, many of you, all of you, have become well educated, both academically and in social values. This is a school that cares about its students and the community surrounding it, which is why I felt particularly drawn to this invitation to address this graduating class. I hope that in some way many of you will join me in the effort to reverse the drift in our country and allow it to regain world leadership in education, economic innovation, and the improvement of the living conditions of the chronically poor. Many of the nonprofits I have known and work with do incredible work to try and relieve the suffering of the physically challenged, children drowning in poverty and deprivation, and families in need of food, shelter, and clothing. They are often doing God's work on very little money and less by way of encouragement. But our country is enormously blessed to have them doing what they do, oftentimes with enormous personal sacrifice. Understandably, many of you graduating today will go on to pursue lucrative and successful careers, and I wish you every opportunity to do so. But I will also ask you that as you begin to organize your life priorities beyond graduation, that you consider joining me in my work by sitting on the board of local nonprofits, women's shelters, homeless programs, food kitchens, or literacy programs, trying to teach young people to read. Regardless of where you end up, you will be close to these problems, and I hope do not cast a blank stare at these opportunities to help people who are at such severe limitations. I can assure you that your life will be much fuller, your communities will be immeasurably better off, and you can have a direct hand in rebuilding the United States of America, one person at a time and one community at a time. I would like to thank the trustees and administration of this extraordinary place called Middlebury for their gracious invitation to speak, and wish all of you, the graduates, my very best wishes for your life and career in the months to come. God bless you.